is what it is, bro. I just don't like speaking about what people are saying about me and fights, and you can't make everyone happy, innit? You can't make everyone happy.
Fury was front row today. Tyson Fury was front row today. Applauding, from what I was told, I didn't see him, but he was applauding your win. I spoke to him after, and he said he expected you to do that tonight. Yeah, I mean, did you catch a glance at him today, sitting there ringside?
Fuck Tyson Fury.
Okay. You don't want to talk about that, obviously.
I was going to say, I don't like trash talking people, but I heard him say something like, oh, I'm here to do commentary about these two sausages or something like that. Bro, that guy that he fought, is an ex-UFC heavyweight champion. Phenomenal story, someone who's changed his life around, and he's just too disrespectful, so forget anything about him right now.
Hey, and welcome back to number one podcast in the sport where we should really be careful what we wish for, shouldn't we? But that's going to make more sense later on when we talk about other things. But what I wanted to do was just start off with the wrap-up of Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. I'm conscious that I didn't really go into much depth around some of the wider issues, so I think there's some value in that. Just even in terms of what it means, like even some of those undercard fights, because I should always come back to this point, and I've made this for a long time, and it's brought me into conflict with people when I say Vidal Riley now is proof of what happens when you walk your own path. I think too many times we over-engineer a fighter's career and we go, well, he should just fight this guy. Why? Because as fans, we think that's a big deal. But most boxing fans wouldn't know how to piece a career together. There's a real art to it. And I think Vidal kind of fell into this sort of Chev Clark situation, and he was fortuitous to do so. But in falling into that, he's found himself that name that he needed to be in the right conversations without having to bang on the door. So now look at where Vidal is. Vidal's in a situation where he sits between the guys like Alois Jr., who's still feeding his way up the rankings, and the guys like Isaac Chamberlain, Jack Massey, etc., who are a bit more established. And so Vidal's in that space now. But because of the momentum from the Chev fight, he's now creeping into that conversation. And I don't think it would be ridiculous to say, a next logical step is someone like a Jack Massey, someone like an Isaac Chamberlain. But this now feels more natural, which it didn't when they were making the noise before. It just didn't feel natural. Now it does, because he's had that bridge fight. And it's going to be the same with Alois Jr. When he gets his bridge fight, whoever that's against, we'll then be talking about him jumping in with some serious people. Part of me is like, would you put Alois Jr. in with a Badou Jack? Yeah, I would. I don't think that fight will happen, though. I don't think Badou Jack's ready to give up the belt just yet, but we can come on to that. So I was happy for Vidal. Chris Billam-Smith versus Brandon Glanton. I think I said it before, that's holiday money. And then if you look at the rest of the card, it did what it was meant to do on that night. Broader than that, let's give some credit to big boss Ben Shalom, right? Because 4 weeks ago, Ben was teetering, where we were like, yeah, I don't know how this is going to work out for Ben. I don't know how this is going to work out for Boxer. We were. That's like the undercurrent when I was talking to people in the sport. They're like, yeah, I don't know about this Ben guy. But he's grown into the role. Like, it's almost like the pressure's made him grow. And, like, I don't think he'll mind me saying this from his holiday beach, wherever he is. He's dressing better. He's speaking better. He's more witty, and he's more willing to engage in the chicanery now. Before, he was trying to rise above it, but I think he realizes you've got to be in the trenches fighting. So I'm happy for Ben in that sense. I'm also happy that he's now got some assets, right? Because Eubank Jr. is now an asset. Whether he fights Conor Benn next or doesn't, he's got options now that are lucrative and attractive. He's got Fraser Clark on the way back up. And there are credible fights you can do with Fraser, Hughie Fury, for example. They're credible fights, so Fraser's got some mileage back into him. And we can go through that whole roster now. Ben Whitaker's now back up. So he's slowly building, but Ben's got to make some intelligent signings. A lot of talent's being swooped up that he's not really pursuing. And it might be the case that he's gone, I don't know how long I've got left in this, so why am I signing anyone? I don't know. But it's been a good few weeks for Ben Shalom. We'll come on to this weekend and maybe why it might be a step back as well. But he's got some value, especially out of Eubank versus Ben. Right? Credit where credit's due. So we got to give him a big pat on the back for that. But there's still more we need from him as a promoter, because you can't have Hearn going backwards, which Hearn is doing right now, and you know what I mean, people not putting their foot squarely on his neck. And that brings us to Eddie. I don't know where Hearn goes. I really don't know where Hearn goes. Hearn's whole point was, I'm the perfect mouthpiece. You know what I mean? I'm like a marketing managed service. You come to me, already built and formed, I can take you into new places and grow you, right? That's Hearn's kind of value proposition. And it's a useful one, by the way. But right now what Hearn needs is someone that can build fighters and build careers. Someone that can grab the talent early and go, look, we need him. We need him. We need him. And move. Like, I know people give Lee Eaton shit, right? They give him a hard time. They give Lee Eaton a hard time. Oh, he's this, he's that. He's a bad carrier for the cartel and all this stuff they say. But you see what Lee Eaton does that people don't often hear? He'll go to shows if he can, amateur shows. He'll go to amateur tournaments if he can. And what he can't get to, he'll talk to people and go, who did well? Who do I need to keep an eye out for? So Lee's always ready to pounce. And Frank getting Lee Eaton in is good, because normally the Frank Warren heads of boxing aren't connected to the sport. I don't think Eddie's got that. Eddie hasn't got someone on the ground that's watching what the amateurs are doing, that's watching what everyone's doing on social media and tracking and going, actually, you know what? There's a buzz around this guy here. And that's why he's lost touch. And that's why he's not signing people. So now look, you've got Conor Benn, who, while he went on the redemption path, and we have to accept that, still lost. And in my opinion, lost handily. Like, I don't think there's a debate that he lost. You've got Joshua now, who is on the downslope. And you know he's on the downslope now because you're hearing stuff like elbow surgery, right? And he's had bad elbows for a while. All boxers get bad elbows, by the way. Like, you jar your elbow so much, you get hit on the elbow so much, you put so much load through your elbows, eventually you're going to get stuff in there that goes a bit wrong, or you've got bits in there you need to flush out. So I have no issue with him doing that, but that's what happens when you get older. It's the elbow. Then it's a shoulder, then it's a wrist, then it's a hamstring, then it's an ankle, and it starts to compound until you can't really do camps anymore. So we're not going to see Joshua realistically before October. Right? We're just not. Maybe, October, I'd say, he'll be ready to go. So what does that mean with Hearn? Like, what is Hearn going to give us? All right, we're going to get some Bam Rodriguez action, some Richardson Hitchens, but we don't care really, do we? There isn't anything Hearn can give British fans right now that's worthwhile. He should almost break the bank. If I was Hearn, I'd break the bank and just make a Zim versus Dalton Smith now. That's what I would do. But for British boxing fans right now, Eddie Hearn's in trouble. I know he's got Leo Atang. I know he's rumored to be signing Adam Macker, and he might sign John Joe Carrigan. Now, if he gets those three, I'd be okay with it, but I don't think he knows what to do with them. Do you know what I mean? I don't think he knows what to do with them. And I'm just speaking now as someone who's watched fighters develop, and I've got some things right, I've got some things wrong. One of my biggest regrets, in fact, is I probably should have kept hold of guys like Courtney and John Palata. I probably should have kept them in my remit for longer, because I look at where I wanted to take them and I look at where they've gone, and they still haven't hit what I think could have been their potential. And the reason that happens is this. Let me explain. A lot of people in boxing only know how to teach boxing, right? They'll teach you the technique and they'll show you. Most coaches want to show you how clever they are. That's boxing training, right? Because they're very insecure. So they don't have what I call repeatable processes, structures, and frameworks that they can just push a kid through and you're going to get a competent boxer at the other end. A guy who's got that is like a Joe Gallagher. Because you've seen with Joe, people come in the machine and they come out the machine, right? Joe's got those sort of foundations in place. Most coaches don't, right? They just rely on the fact that maybe they know a bit or they've done a bit in the ring themselves and they think they can just do it. And that's very dangerous for a fighter because you're not understanding what this fighter needs in front of you, right? And most coaches don't. So when you get a young kid out the GB system, you've got to understand what they don't do well. What they do well is almost irrelevant because they can just do that on tap. What don't they do well? Right? What is the kid big enough? Is he strong enough in his weight class? Have you put him in with really good guys to see where he's at? You know, what is their opinion? What's he like physically? What's he like mentally? You know, when you put him in a tough environment, how does he cope? There are all these things that I'd want to know before I even put a kid in for his debut. And then you work backwards from that and you go, okay, for him to make his debut, we want strong progress against all of these key elements. What's the plan to get him there, right? And you start building that plan. And that's when you hear me say, work to a plan. Always work to a plan because even if the plan is wrong, you know one thing is true and it's that plan doesn't work. If you don't work to a plan, it's like being in the middle of the ocean at midnight and trying to work out how to swim north. Do you know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. Unless you know how to spot the North Star, it's not really going to happen. And even then, by the time you get your head down and start swimming, you're being pulled left, right, and center. So you need something that tells you you're on the right track or you're on the wrong track, and you go from there, right? And just in my eyes, that is what good trainers do. They work to a plan. Right? You look and you go, right, you'll make your debut in September. Between now and then, here's what we're going to do. Month 1, month 2, month 3. This is what we're going to do, and we're going to keep checking that it's the right thing to do. As opposed to, just come in and train. I don't know. I watch a lot of boxers train. And a lot of boxers go through the motions. And I'll be sat there, and you don't want to be disrespectful and talk in someone else's gym. But I'm like, okay, but where's the growth point today? What is he better at today than he was yesterday? A lot of times the answer is nothing. Because coaches don't really fix things. They just coach. They do what's best for them, not necessarily what's best for the fighter. And this is why you see kids go from British level to European and world level and start falling apart. And then they go and find a brand name American trainer, which doesn't really do anything for them because the foundations aren't there. And these American trainers will tell you, look, I'm working with damaged goods here. I'm trying my best, but the foundations ain't here and it's too late to teach them. And so to come all the way back around, these kids like Leo Atom, Adam Macker, John Joe Carrigan, Lewis Richardson even, they've got a big journey in the next few months to put these plans in place and start working to them. Yeah, that's what they've done with Alois Jr. They're working to a plan. You can see him getting better at things. And so for all the stuff that people say about Ben Davis, and I like the fact that there's a plan, there's some logic, there's some intelligence to it. And they work to that. And that's when you see the progression. So hopefully the guys at Matchroom are understanding what's going on and they build Leo the right way. Because there's no rush with that guy. He'll get to about 109, 110 kilograms in the next couple of years, like solid, conditioned, mature, flesh, tissue, whatever you want to call it. And then it's about those other things, making great decisions in the ring, having great technique, understanding that really this is a work rate sport. And if you can outwork people, you cause hell. All these little things. And once you start to piece those together, you start creating monsters. And like I come back to, I wish I'd had more time with my guys to have created those monsters. Because I'd be in a far different position now. Never forget. And I tell boxers this. Sometimes you're with the person already that can get the best out of you. And no matter where you go after that, you're just chasing that feeling. Sometimes it's best to stay where you are. Because I want to pose this question. How many boxers have you genuinely seen move trainers and be better? Not have better results, because when you move trainers, you normally go back a couple of steps in terms of who you're fighting. But they fought for a world championship, gave us one performance, moved trainers, went to a world championship fight again, gave us a completely better performance. Like, you take Anthony Joshua, for example. Was he better under, what do you call it? Was he better under McCracken than he's been since? Probably. Was Dillian White better under Mark Tibbs than he's been since? Probably. And we can go through it. Was Derek better under Don Charles? Probably. Sometimes the change doesn't give you the desired outcome. So, two things. One, Matchroom really need to be careful with how they grow these fighters, because there's potential there, but it needs to be realized. And two, as boxing fans, just understand all of this thing like he needs a new trainer stuff is the dumbest stuff you can ever say. It's dumb. Yeah? And I know boxing fans love their own opinions, and they think that because they read everything and they're up to speed on stuff, they understand everything. I promise you, if you understood the chemistry between fighter and trainer, you'd be training yourself. It's impossible to understand. Sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah? But because it's a professional game, some trainers need that money. So they'll stick around even though they know they're not the best guy for that fighter. They'll stick around for the money. But anyway, in summary, Ben Shalom, good. Eddie Hearn, in crisis. Won't talk about it, but we understand that he's in crisis. And you see him now lashing out at people, right? He gave an IFL interview where he was talking about the whole senior thing, and he was trying to poo-poo that because obviously it wasn't his moment. And what people don't realize is he was kept in the dark. So Hearn didn't know senior was coming. You know, and Eddie likes to be on top of everything, and no one could tell him that senior was coming because they kept the circle of trust super tight. And when people say, how do you know? It's like, well, once you know the circle of trust and people trust you not to say anything until the right time, then you can. But here's the only thing I'm going to say about Chris Eubank Sr. and whether the appearance was prearranged or not. The story he told on his call, Chris Eubank, will change. Over the next 10 years, that story is going to change loads of times. And it's going to change because what really happened was the Eubanks were like, how do we get dad paid? How do we get him paid? Because he deserves to be paid. Because here's what they realized. And I've been saying this. That event is 60% of what it could have been without Senior. Senior's the one that links it all together. Right? And if they'd given Senior the money they ended up giving him, they just said at the beginning, mate, you're going to get this money to promote the fight. We'd have had him all over the media. And we would have had some golden moments. We still had a golden moment. And probably a more impactful moment. But we'd have had a lot more content from him. But just know, hands were shaken a long time ago. Yeah? Whatever they tell you in the public, hands were shaken a long time ago. So he was definitely showing up. The modalities about how it was going to be done, I think were finalized probably end of the week before fight week. And then it was just working. Because I keep telling people, if this was such a big unknown, why did the production team look on point? They were ready for everything. They knew exactly where Chris needed to be. They knew everything. They were just calling out instructions. They'd gone through the playbook. They knew what was required. So they must have known this because you don't just make that up on the day. And people say, yeah, but what about Chris and the music? And I'm like, well, you're telling me that Chris Eubank came straight out the car and was like, yeah, make these changes to the music. It needs more bass. How do you know it needs more bass unless you've heard it in a sound check? You have no idea. Do you see what I mean? Like, you have to have heard what it sounds like out live in order to say this needs more bass. So he's been a part of this, man. Don't get it twisted. The Saudi Arabian guys run a very tight outfit. They want absolute control over everything. They weren't going to leave the Eubank thing till the last minute. No chance. What Turkey would have said is, here's the deal, take it or leave it. But we need you committed early. And Chris would have said, yeah, I'll have it. So the real cause of all of this was Chris wanted his dad to get a check. and they did what they needed to do to get paid. But here's the thing. They didn't hustle anyone because they delivered one of the great moments in boxing history. They delivered the moment of the night. And that moment, if you look at how many views, we're talking about like 20-something billion impressions. I don't know how much that would have cost in the free market, but definitely a lot more than these guys paid Eubank Sr. Can we just talk about Billy Joe Saunders quickly? Who are the boxing fans that still support Billy Joe Saunders? Remember 5 years ago, he made a video about how to beat your wife up during lockdown. I'm paraphrasing, but you get what I mean. Like, that's what he did, and he got fined for that. Billy Joe Saunders was driving around in his Rolls Royce alongside, I think it was Jake Ball in the car, terrorizing crackheads for no reason, humiliating them for no reason. You know, Billy Joe's the guy that had his like 8-year-old kid driving a Range Rover Sport around. He's also the guy that was calling Napa what, big nose, rubber lips. At what point do boxing fans go, this guy doesn't represent our sport well? But I think there's a subset of boxing fans that love Billy Joe because he is offensive. Because that's who they are. And it's a shame that in the sport, we tolerate these guys. Because you know these guys mostly don't buy tickets, don't buy pay-per-views. And they're proud of it. So they don't actually contribute anything to the sport. We don't need them. Yet people still give them safe harbor in the sport of boxing. When are we going to get rid of these people? Because until we do, guys like Billy Joe will never have to behave accordingly. And we're talking about a guy that does very stupid things that seem to always be designed to provoke vulnerable and marginalized groups for some reason. Because the thing is, like, if you know travelers, right, you have conversations with travelers, and a few travelers I know, and you talk about Billy Joe Saunders, and they're like, that guy talks crazy around here, and he gets dealt with. Like, over there, they know what he's like, and they deal with him. Yeah, boxing, we can't. And that's a real shame, because that was the only black mark on the Eubank versus Ben thing, in my opinion, was the fact that Billy Joe came and embarrassed himself that way. And I bet he hasn't got a license, so the board can't even do anything about it. But this is about boxing. Like, Frank should say he can't come to my shows. Eddie should say he can't come to my shows, and so should Ben Shalom. Even if he's got a ticket, don't let him in. Like, it's not good for the sport commercially. But I think, look, overall, great event. Great event. And as I keep telling people, we can't call that the norm, right? That will just be the exception. As it always has been, as it always will be. It's just the exception. Every so often, we're going to have a night that just blows boxing up into a place you're not used to. It's like when Ben Whittaker did the whole showboating thing and that went crazy. Sometimes boxing just captures the moment. But we can't view that as the normal. The normal is us complaining about fights we didn't ask for and fighters who don't want to fight each other. That's our norm. So let's celebrate the wins when we get them. And that was a massive win for us. And that put boxing in the right light because everybody was talking about it. You know, you saw the match from 5K. And normally I think it's a stupid gimmick. But it gets people out running. And it also does wonders for visibility of the sport. Like you saw Chris Webb MP there and all sorts, and he's becoming a massive ally and advocate for boxing. Just need to see some concrete steps that he's willing to take. So one of them should be the protection of boxing gyms. Like, I'm a big advocate of, we need to start putting planning designations, which are like, this building can never be used for anything else, right? That should apply to pubs. That should apply to churches and places of worship. That should apply to so many things like schools. You shouldn't just be able to sell off a school to build flats. We should have schools. And if the school's no longer being used, then it should have a community purpose attached to it. But we need to start protecting certain things. And hopefully we can start protecting boxing gyms as well. They're an important part of our community. Football pitches too. I support that. Playing fields in general, I support. I think we need to get to that point because in London, there are big problems. It's very, very hard to get premises in London. Like, I know clubs that are shelling out $2-3 grand a week. And you know, when you do that, you've got to get the influencers in. You've got to get all these sorts of people in, which become distractions from the real purpose of boxing, which is to help change people's lives in the local community. But that's a massive loop. But back to what we were saying. We need to appreciate the wins when we can, celebrate these moments, which brings me to the next point. Should there be a rematch? So my real question is, why? What sense does a rematch make other than everybody gets rich at the fans' expense? What sense does it make? Conor Benn struggled to deal with a bigger guy. Eubank struggled with the weight cut and therefore being able to impose his physicality. Okay? That's the story of the fight. There's no way you can make that fight at 160 again. It didn't look safe for Eubank to make that weight. It doesn't feel safe now. So why would you do it? And Conor's too small to move the weight up to 163. I reckon Eubank could make 163 safely. And people say, yeah, but it's only 3 pounds. It's not only 3 pounds, because you see what those 3 pounds are? They're the things the body doesn't want to give up, because the body knows that it's impaired if it gives those things up. So let's just say, best case scenario, you've got about 5.5 grams of sodium in your system, 5.5 grams of magnesium, maybe, 10 grams of potassium in you, whatever those ratios are. When you add up all the micros in you, maybe you've got at best 80 or 90 grams of stuff that you really need to function, right? Then you need some substrate to put that in. So we'll give it like a 20-1, okay? That's about 3 pounds worth of micronutrients and substrate. So at that point, you're starting to deplete stuff like cerebral spinal fluid, etc. You're starting to shrink the membrane around the skull. You're starting to do stuff that's harmful. So when people say it's only 3 pounds difference, it's not the quantity that matters. It's the quality of what you're getting rid of. That's important. Because once you start to do that, you increase concentrations of things like potassium, so you start cramping up. And actually, there's a real risk of a heart attack because your heart can essentially cramp up. Chris was in the hospital for 3 days. And I'm not saying that he was sick, but they had to monitor his vitals, right? So that rehydration and reflation process took longer than people thought. And for medical reasons, they probably had to give him IV drips greater than the permitted amount. But I guess the fight's over, so it doesn't really matter because you're out of competition. But that tells you the level of care that was needed after that fight. So why would we ask for that again? Just answer me that question. Why would we ask for that again unless we found a way for Chris to do it healthily? Do you know what I mean? That's the thing. Maybe you can say weigh in at 164, but rehydrate to 170. Even then, is that safe? I don't know. But I don't think we want to see a spectacle like that again. I don't think weight should ever be such a consideration again. I think we just need to go back to people fighting in their rightful weight classes. And I think that's what Conor Benn should be doing. Conor Benn should be looking at your Josh Kellys, etc., and maybe just parking off fighting Eubank for a bit. I'll tell you a fight I'd like to see. Conor Benn versus Denzel Bentley. Because Nigel already said Conor was giving him hell. Let's find out. Let's find out what Denzel does when you take the 20-ounce gloves off his hands. That'll be a fair fight. Why not? I just don't want to see the Eubank rematch. In fact, I'd see Denzel fight both those guys. But I just don't want to see the Eubank-Benn rematch. Mainly because the first fight took so much of the things that were important and drew a line under them. The tension between the dads, they hugged. The tension between the fighters, they respect each other. So what's the problem now? What are we buying into now? It's not like the first fight was controversial. It wasn't. It was fair. 160 and 112 is a fair result of that fight. If you understand boxing, you know when a middleweight hits you is different to when a welterweight hits you. Just simple physics. So I don't want to see the rematch again. I don't. And I think as boxing fans, we need to stop with these kind of lazy ideation processes. Like, oh, yeah, let's just have the rematch. It's lazy. We've got lazy as boxing fans because we've been indoctrinated into the fact that every fight should have a rematch. No, Let everyone move on. Let Junior move on. Because they're talking September, right? I reckon it's going to take Chris till the middle of June for all of his vitals to be stable and normal again, right? Like, he's back to his walking around kind of physiology. And then you tell me by then he's got to go straight back into camp to make 160 pounds again. For what? It would just be for the money at that point. Does he need more money? No. And I'm not surprised that a lot of the pressure for the rematch is coming from people who stand to gain financially from it, not the fighters themselves. You know, what were you going to do? Like, Senior can't appear twice, do you know what I mean? Or you're going to have the sequel where Senior is more vocal this time. Is Senior going to be in the corner? Is Nigel going to be in the corner? Just realizing I'm half an hour into this one, so I might save this for the next episode, because I did say mentally I need to just have a quick break here. But there's only so much scripting we can do, guys. Do you know what I mean? There's only so much WWE we want in boxing. We accepted it for Ben Eubank because of who they were, and we were like, you got to get this right, because there are a lot of emotional elements you got to tie together, right? This is about closure. If you're now like, well, we're going to do it all again, you're going to have to script something, aren't you? So all of a sudden now, what's the next script? The dads are in the corner. Nigel's going to get his license. He's going to jump in the corner. Chris is going to get his license, jump in the corner. Maybe they do the license at the same time. Now we've got the documentary behind the scenes, and like it's Chris Senior and Nigel, and they've got to work together. And maybe there's some value in that, because I do think there's a TV show between Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn. I think while I still believe that they've been friends for about 30 years, I think they know that winding each other up is good money for both of them. So that's why they carry it on. But those two, can you imagine them doing a road trip across like America or something? And it would just be boxers versus food, or boxers versus whatever. And you just had those guys arguing in a car over absolutely everything. And those guys just doing stuff. And Chris is being Chris, and Nigel just got his head in his hands going, oh, Chris. Oh, mate. What's going on, Chris? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't mind that. I'm not averse to that. Just two grumpy old men. Well, one grumpy old man, one effervescent man. But as a boxing fan and someone who wants to see the sport grow, I don't want to be sat there while they're in their writing room scripting the second fight, like we saw the first fight. It wasn't close. And if you let Junior come in healthy and the way he should be, it will be bad for Conor. And that's not fair on Conor. So I don't want to see the rematch. And I don't think we should be calling for the rematch. In the interest of safety for both guys, we shouldn't be calling for the rematch. We're risking another Michael Watson, Gerald McClellan type situation. And we all know that if that happens, boxing's in trouble. And that's a sensible point to pause, because I want to continue that theme in a second. But I'm going to go and have a quick pit stop. So just scroll up, click, and I'll see you in part 2.